Thank you for joining our panel, Making Peace with Nature in the New Fashion Era, where we will be highlighting the business case for nature-focused solution. The social and environmental benefits of sustainability are well known. Far too often the economic ones are misrepresented. Why? Because many stakeholders believe the transition to be too expensive. Others recognize that sustainability can actually benefit corporations. Today we are joined by Niclas Svenningsen. There he is, manager at Global Climate Action, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Darshana Gajare, I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's been a while since the last time I've been to India. The lead of sustainable fashion at Lakmé Fashion Week India. And I hope I pronounced that correctly because Austrians are very strict when it comes to their name. Ledl, head of product management at Lenzing. Is that correct? Ledl? Okay,
Yes.
I was trying to bring in a little Vietnamese accent to it, a little waltz to it. So let's start right away with Niclas. So do you believe environmental and economic sustainability are inherently linked, or can't they come together?
Well, I actually believe that it's not only that they are linked, they are different parts of the same issue. Many people today, when they talk about climate change, I work with climate change, so I come from that angle on sustainability, they actually think about polar bears on melting icebergs, about remote glaciers in the Himalayas, or maybe something that's happening in the Arctic or Antarctic. But the fact is that climate change sustainability is something that is affecting us here and now. Just last week, we had a good example of the heat wave in Western Canada, where we had heats exceeding 50 degrees Celsius or 122 degrees Fahrenheit, basically burning down a village. We are going to see much more of that in the future, not only heat waves, but different extreme weather events. But more importantly, and this is really the message here, sustainability and climate change is affecting the very ecosystems that are sustaining our society on the planet. And fashion as a sector is especially vulnerable, actually. Fashion has long supply chains starting in ecosystems that are vulnerable to climate change, production facilities that are in countries where people are definitely subject to climate change and sustainable development challenges, subject to logistics that also are subject to climate change, and then selling the products to customers are becoming more and more aware about the issue of climate change and about sustainable development and sustainability also in the fashion that they are wearing on the bodies. So in that way, climate change is actually a very personal issue. So we see an increased consumer awareness. We see more and more companies recognizing the risk that lack of sustainability and lack of action on climate is posing to their businesses. In UNFCCC, the UN Climate Change Convention, where I work, we have launched the Fashion Charter for Climate Action. We have about 150 of the largest brands and supplier organizations working together there to really develop a roadmap for how to achieve a climate neutral fashion sector. And I think that we are really seeing all over the world that companies are starting to see the writing on the wall. If they haven't done that already, they are probably going to lose out very quickly on this. So my answer is no. They are not only able, it's not only possible to see them, working together. They have to work together. Without sustainability, there's no economy. Thanks.
Well, and Caroline, I see you've been struggling to balance out that camera. Is that all set now?
No, everything's fine.
Oh, because we need to talk about the balance, because we would like to know from you, how has Lenzing balanced financial prosperity and sustainability within its operation? So what's your secret?
What's our secret? For us, I think what we did quite some years ago, that we took a need that we had as a company, becoming more environmental friendly, and really change this into one of our benefits. And now sustainability, I would say, is very deeply rooted within our overall company strategy. So whenever we create new products, we always look at what's the impact of this product, not only for us and for our production, but also for our customers. We call this net benefit products. because for us it's important that each and every fiber, so we are really at the beginning of the textile value chain, that the fibers not only have a low environmental footprint or are sustainable for us as a company and where we produce, but really for our customers, so that they have a lower environmental impact throughout the whole chain. And I think this is what our customers are used now when they talk about Lenzing, that they talk about sustainability. It took us quite some years to really come to a point where we are also happy with what we can deliver. I think what makes us, or what's important for us, is that we are not at the end. And I really have to say, we are also part of the UN Fashion Charter, for example, because the decarbonization of the whole industry is very important for us. And we know that all starts with the material, and we can achieve it only if we're working together with our customers, with brands, with retailers, and with the consumers. Because otherwise, I think we will not be able to really change the whole system and create, let's say, a fashion industry that all of us here being here want to see in the future. So yeah, to come back to your question, what's our secret? I think there's not really a secret. It's a deep commitment from our organization.
We just lost some bits and pieces from your answer, probably because you want to keep it. Apparently, you want to keep it a secret.
No, I said it's not a secret. It's a deep commitment to have sustainability at the core of our business, and always try to get better.
Just an add-on question, because you said it took you quite some time just to achieve these goals because of the attitude of your company. But with that wisdom that has been collected within your company, don't you think, like, if you would share with others, that this transition would be much faster then, as they pretty much could know much more about the challenges that you went through?
No, definitely. And I think this is why we're part also of this large initiatives, because we believe also in sharing information and sharing examples. But I have maybe one quick example that I wanted to share before, where also we have to still learn. And reducing our carbon footprint is very important. And what we're trying to do there is source renewable energy for the production of our fibers, which in Europe is quite easily achievable when it comes to electricity. But when we look at Asia, also for us, this is still a challenge we face, because sometimes even if you want to change, it's not easy for you also as a single company to do so. You need the support of other companies, as well as from the communities and maybe even the state.
So, as we've been talking about Asia, Darshana, I'm sure that you know a bit about Asia with your work in sustainable fashion for Lakmé Fashion Week. Do you have any examples of brands or initiatives who you've witnessed successfully balance both environmental and economic responsibilities?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So at Lakmé Fashion Week, we actually interface with a varied set of stakeholders, right? From designers to retailers, artisan clusters, NGOs, both my fellow panelists, like, from UN to Lenzing. So we partner with everybody. And just to give you an overview, the Indian handloom industry employs close to 4.3 million people directly or indirectly, making it India's second largest employment opportunity for the rural population, only after agriculture. And I'm bringing this up because handlooms is one of the most environmentally conscious methods of textile production. It's low on wastage, it's low on energy consumption, it's very high on skill, and it's also a huge part of Indian heritage and our lineage. Therefore, handlooms and crafts have always been a huge part of the sustainability narrative for us, which may or may not necessarily be the case for other countries. So the handloom actually becomes a big benefit for Indian designers and brands, but in some way it's also a huge responsibility to a great extent. And to answer your questions, there are a lot of brands that I can definitely think of, and I'll just give you brief examples. So when we talk about a designer label, there are a couple. For example, Eka by Reena Singh, there is Pero by Anit Arora, who extensively use handloom textiles, natural dyes, and a lot of other conscious techniques of production, right from textile to printing to dyeing, and even production. And both these brands, from an economic point of view, since we're at that conversation, they both supply to around 250 stores globally. And this entire consistency of getting that orders has also enabled them to give those continued and consistent livelihood opportunities to the weavers as well. Even through the pandemic, I know for sure both of these brands have been able to nurture and sustain their entire weaver base as well. So which is a great thing to do, considering there were so many people who've lost their jobs in the past year and a half. Another example that I want to mention here is this brand called House of Anita Dongre. It's a 20-year-old brand, and it basically caters to 4 different segments of the market through their 4 different brands. And their commitment to sustainability is superlative. Everything from their office to their stores are consciously built. They use energy in a very organized way. They use renewable energy. They have their own wastewater recycling units. They have textile waste management systems. They use sustainable materials like Lenzing, handlooms, better cotton, and so on. And this business has over 1,000 point of sales across 114 cities, including a few global locations. And they have also been able to get international investments and have also crossed a revenue of 130 million in the last year. So that just goes to show that with the right initiatives and the right planning, we can really coexist with nature and the business. And since we're at it, I also want to mention another initiative that actually we launched with our partners, which is the UN in India, the Ministry of Textiles, Government of India, and CMAI, who are basically Clothing Manufacturers Association of India, so the largest body for the retailers and manufacturers representation. So we launched this program called SURE, which stands for Sustainable Resolution, and it is a voluntary commitment by 16 of India's mainstream retail brands. Now, to give you a scale, these 16 signatories amount to like a 30,000 crore rupees business. I don't even know what it means converted to euro or dollars, but that's humongous. So that covers a lot of ground when it comes to business. So all of these 16 brands have also committed to 5 goals which revolve around environmental and social sustainability. And we know for sure that when it is retailers, they are going to be able to balance the economics and the sustainability, because that's been their forte for all these years. And recently, actually on occasion of World Environment Day, we also did a roundtable with UNEP to see how we can work together, considering that this is going to be the decade of ecosystem restoration. So we are looking at even large-scale businesses to implement certain practices that both of these areas can essentially coexist.
So
I
apparently,
hope I've answered your question.
well, yeah, but also because it also kills like the next question, which would have been like, what can we learn, especially from Indian companies? But you pretty much already answered that question as well. So there's really a lot that needs to be exchanged. But coming to Niclas, because of course it's always a matter of things needs to change, and change is expensive. So of course, like the question is, for whom it's easier or more difficult, or in which way does it differ if you go if you build up a sustainability case? Is it easier or more difficult for smaller or rather big companies?
So I think that the fundamental principles are the same for large and small companies. The SDGs are the same. The need for climate action is the same. But obviously, a large brand, a large global brand, has a completely different situation than a small local company in addressing these issues. I believe that one thing that is important to keep in mind is, of course, that even large brands are in the end working locally. If it's in their production, in their sales, in their manufacturing, they are eventually working somewhere locally, even if it may be many different locations. I believe, however, that if you look at the sector today, you have a few large organizations or companies that are dominating the market, and then you have many, many, many more smaller and medium-sized companies that are also, working along and in line with the large companies. And interesting with the fashion sector is that there's never a one-to-one relationship. It's almost like the strands in a weave or in a fabrics, where one brand are sharing many suppliers with many other brands, and one supplier are sharing many raw materials producers with many other manufacturing centers, and they have many customers that are the same. So the trick here really is to get this big and also quite diversified sector to speak with one voice on sustainability and on climate action. And that is actually the fundamental reason why we started the Climate Action Charter in UNFCCC, to enable these both large and small organizations and companies to work together, to find a common recommendation, a common roadmap, if you like, for how to go from where we are today into a more sustainable and climate-friendly future. And we believe that the larger companies, they do have the business muscles in a different way than smaller companies in engaging in a dialogue with policymakers, with suppliers, with all other stakeholders in the fashion sector, and of course also have a larger communications and marketing muscle, if you like, towards the consumers and their customers, who they eventually are sharing with everybody else. So there is definitely a case to saying that larger organizations and companies, they have a possibility, and actually I would say a moral obligation also, to pave the way for smaller companies or organizations to follow them. But essentially, the business case is the same for everybody, I think. Thank you.
Not thank you yet, because I would like to add to what you just said, because we would like to know what exactly can the industry do to make sustainable practices more inclusive and scalable for smaller and startup brands. You just mentioned there's an obligation for the bigger companies, but the industry in general, what is it that they should do or they need to do so that even smaller brands are highly more interested in doing so, and not relying on bigger companies for that matter?
Well, if we're looking at what's happening in the fashion charter right now, is that we have identified a number of barriers: access to technologies, access to renewable energy in producer countries, for example, which all producers, all brands, they have the same problem, they have the same challenge. And in order to achieve a breakthrough, you need to also have a governmental policy in producer countries that are supporting a more sustainable sector. And since this sector for some countries is actually the largest export sector, these companies and this sector has a very big voice. So to be able to identify and propose a solution and identify the measures that policymakers can do to support these countries, and not only in producer countries but also in consumer countries, to make the whole fashion sector more sustainable, to get better access to renewable energy, to have better access to sustainable fabrics and fibers, to have access and standards that prevents a race to the bottom on labor issues and other sustainability issues. That is really what we're looking at here. And again, everybody has a role to play, but the larger companies really are in a more powerful situation to engage in that dialogue.
Thank you, Niclas. Back to you, Caroline. I really intend to do the Venus thing, the Caroline. Well, as we know that to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by the intended target of 2030, fashion industry has to engage. We just mentioned that even before. So what does the industry leaders currently holding back from aligning with this mission? Is it on purpose? Is it that sometimes they're not even aware of that themselves? Or where's the hiccup?
Yeah. Where's the hiccup? I have to say, I think that the industry leaders, all of them are very well aware of the need to reach also the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think we've reached now only a decade where we are able to fulfill them. So we really need to speed up also here. But I would also say there is a critical role that consumers play within this transformation. And I think that all industry leaders, is it either from, let's say, a fiber producer or within the textile industry and the value chain, or within, let's say, brand retailers, or also resale, all of them are aware and are aligning their sustainability targets also to the Sustainable Development Goals. But there is the need to have a very strong consumer education as well, because at the end, it's the consumers who buy the products, and they also make the decision whether or not they buy a product that is either more sustainable or is produced in a way that harms not only the environment, but also the livelihood of people, mostly in producing countries. So that's, I think, is one of the main targets that we have to even stronger focus on, is how can we engage and educate consumers. And there I often see also some kind of, let's say, consumers, they are already a little bit overloaded with so many different certifications, so many different standards. So we really need to also be able to tell the story in an easy way, to have consumers make aware of what they're buying and how they can also influence, let's say, just how our planet and our livelihood is going in the future. And I have to say, it comes back to the fact that within the last decades, we've seen a very strong change of the fashion system. I mean, in earlier days, the amount of money you spend on your clothing was huge compared to what we see now. And people are used to getting something new every week or every second week, especially in Europe or the US. So we also have this new system. And I know that we're already on the verge of changing this. And we see this especially with younger generations, where you see more secondhand buying, or people also swapping clothes, or durability becomes very important. But I think we're at the beginning of this trend, and this trend will become very, very important also for us to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, because it is a way to go back and further discuss also sustainability issues that we've definitely faced within the industry.
I absolutely agree. You just mentioned the consumers, but I would like to go back to the designers and asking a question to Darshana, because we would like to know from you, what do you think, what resources do you believe designers need in order to be successfully achieve economic prosperity and true sustainability? I mean, next to money, I understand straight money, that would help, but in general, and like in resources, what do you think designers need?
I think from an awareness point of view, there's a fair bit of awareness. However, I would like to just bring that down to information and access, because that there is a lot of information out there, but I think it's just too scattered and people really don't know what to pick and choose. So I think that, and when I say access, it could be technology, it could be raw materials, it could be just access to maybe a network that would allow collaborators to support each other. And I often feel that designers are mostly a bunch of creative people, and more often than not, they get carried away in their creativity and end up making products that may or may not have a business feasibility to it. So I think as a resource or as a tool, I think every designer should definitely invest or look out for a partner or a consultant who might have a fair bit of understanding of business or marketing or finance, to really add that business value for all the sustainability inputs that the designers are basically putting into a product development. So I think, just to cut it short, that's something that is essential for designers.
Well, then, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you, Niclas. Thank you, Darshana. Thank you, Caroline. And that you found some time just to talk to us for that matter. Thank you. Dankeschön.
Thank you so much.
As we near the end of our day, our final conversation, a creative economy for sustainable development, is up next.